Money Sense is brought to you by the Chamber Pension Plan. For further information, visit chamberpension.ky. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you. Please be advised that the pension contribution holiday has been extended until 31st of December 2021. Employers and plan members should ensure arrangements are in place for salary deductions and remittance following this date. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan, keeping you informed. For further information, visit chamberpension.ky. And for information as it happens, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Email admin@pensions.ky or call 745-7630. We're here for you.
Live from Radio Cayman Studio, this is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
A very good morning and warm welcome to Money Sense. I'm Simon Caudry, and I'm joined in the studio this morning by my co-host Amy Huddle.
Good morning.
Good morning. This morning we have the distinct pleasure of welcoming the Deputy Premier and Minister of Finance, the Honourable Chris Saunders. Minister, good morning to you.
Good morning to everyone, and good morning to your great listeners. It's nice to be here this morning.
Were you saying to us earlier this is the first time you've been back on Radio Cayman since the election?
That is correct. Pretty much has been very hectic from we started. I mean, we came in pretty much, we had to get the Strategic Policy Statement, SPS, out. That was required to be tabled in the Legislative Assembly literally 3 months after the election, so we had to get it inside here by July 15th. And pretty much all hands were on deck for that one, so it pretty much sets out the government priorities over the next 3 years, which would then also serve as the basis for which we prepare the next two budgets, which is the 2022 and 2023 budget, those financial years.
Well, you've segued to my first question, which is government budgets. I think we had a press release last week now, if my memory serves, perhaps it was the beginning of this, where we talked about a government budget surplus on a primary basis. So revenue seems to be okay, and spending is obviously under a reasonable amount of control when you're generating a surplus. So what are government priorities right now, and how are you going to continue to pay for those?
Well, the first thing right now, I mean, when we took over, the government was formed back in April. One of the first things that we looked at was the preview, which is actually the pre-economic and financial update preview, which was actually done, I think, back in March. I think it was actually tabled back in March. And pretty much when we looked at that document, the first thing that jumped out at us was a $98 million deficit that the government was forecasting for this year.
Oh, this is this famous deficit that's not a deficit that
No. Well,
you and
actually,
the former minister had a disagreement.
No. I can explain to you where the differences came. But as you can see from this preview, that was actually
So this was just a draft in March, right?
No, 16th of March is actually a legal document that was required to be filed pretty much a month before the election to see what the government financial position was expected to be. So that was actually done where we had an issue. So the $98 million deficit for this year wasn't the issue. What we had an issue with was the actual 2020 deficit, where in this document, the preview document, it shows roughly $38 million deficit in 2020. But then by the time we rolled around to the 2020 actuals, when they finished up everything, it actually was much, much higher, where it was about, I think, 89 or 88 million. So it basically went up by about $49 million, the difference. And again, we went through, because I wanted to also understand what that increase came from. So for example, 10 million of the difference related to the port project, where previously the previous government was capitalizing the port project to saying that this would have been an asset. But then the minute that that old project was abandoned, you can no longer consider it an asset. You have to write it off. So that 10 million of it was pretty much related to the port. So I have still actually been waiting on all the different adjustments that actually made the difference between what was stated then versus what it became. Now, granted, it is something that happened in 2020. It wasn't our government. We can only rely on the information that's given to us. But for us, why it was actually important is that even though it's immaterial in the grand scheme of government overall expenditure, 49 million is material when you're thinking about a lot of the social programs that you want to do. And it's also for us, we need to have some level of confidence in the system also. So one of the things that we have never played politics with, has been the finances of this country. And if you go back to my time in opposition, barring questions related to Cynical, we generally never question the Ministry of Finance. And one of the reasons why that is also important to me is back in 2009, when the government was raising the bond, I think it was $312 million US bond, I was part of the roadshow in terms of going out, selling the Cayman Islands and convincing investors why they should basically buy this bond to assist the government at that time and the people of the country when we were in serious financial that's like right after the 2008 financial crisis. And when you go through that process and you see the questions being asked and you have an idea how people are looking at you internationally, it was important to me that where the finances of this country is concerned, that there was a certain amount of maturity. Now, I do recognize in the overall scheme of government finances, a $49 million deficit on $800 and something million worth of expenditure. And the auditor would tell you that that's immaterial, whatever those changes are. It wouldn't be material enough to change the financial statements. But for us, it's about a matter of getting a certain amount of comfort with the information. Now, I do recognize government is a big beast.
Is that a government problem, or is it a civil service problem? People who prepare the budgets then? No,
and the thing about it is this. When you're talking about 122 cost centers and 50 revenue centers, a total of 177 different revenues and cost centers you're looking at, thereabouts, and you look at the people that's actually doing the work, you realize there's so much transactions, even from government to government, that sometimes the bottom it out was a challenge. And one of the things that most people didn't realize is that even though the different ministries were assigned very early on, I think after we got sworn in, we never changed the ministerial structure or the configuration of it from an accounting standpoint until the 1st of July. So we continued on to the old structure. So, for example, the Ministry of Tourism and District Administration continued from a reporting standpoint until the 30th of June. Versus then the 1st of July now, District Admin went over to Minister Juliana, Education, and that literally became two separate ministries.
So that's when you do your reorganization.
Yeah, so, and one of the things that we found, and expectedly again, is if we look at the first 6 months up to June 30th, we were actually averaging 71 million a month in expenses. Then we went to July, where they went to the new configuration. We noticed the expenses dropped to 66 million. Now, again, I knew immediately when I saw that number, I knew something was wrong. And that generally would be that, okay, did one CFO was supposed to take on something, didn't take on something, or one was supposed to give up something. So there's this kind of teething issue that you go through now. Because, like, again, you're talking about 122 cost centers and literally 50 revenue centers.
That seems like quite a lot. When someone listening to this might think, it's a relatively small country, 60,000 people, 122 cost centers, is that...
Actually, no. You see, one of the things that people miss, and regardless of the size of a country, this is what you pay for governance. Checks and balances comes at a cost. So even regardless of the size of a country, now if you look at the US, for example, even the federal government, they have so many layers. You have the federal government, you got the state government, you got the city government, you got the municipalities, you got so much different layers inside their system of government. We, in essence, only have one layer. So we, in essence, are actually trying to replicate something that even much larger countries have. So if you go through and add up the entire governance structure, from the state, federal, right up, you realize it's also a lot still.
I guess you're saying, in a sense, there's a fixed cost of running a country. In a sense, take an example of the police. You couldn't run a country without a police force, and you can't run a police force with proportionately one person for 60,000. You need a minimum number of people to make it efficient, whereas in other bigger countries, they'd have a much fewer number of police compared on a proportionate basis than we would, probably.
Yeah. And they also talk about accountability, because if you have one ministry can have several departments. If you're having every single department or everything lumped into one ministry, how then can you hold a particular manager responsible for his expenses or his revenues, or do you meet him for his target? So the structure has got to also reflect what it is you expect for people to be accountable.
So you like the structure as it currently is?
It is. Can it be more efficient? Yes. But, I mean, I'm not going to sit back and say something is wrong with the structure. It did come in handy in the sense that as we're now doing the configuration, because everything still feeds into the different at the cost center level, even if you move ministries from one section to the next or whatever, the cost centers is what move. So the historical information remains. So you can still see it as you configure around now. In a place like the US and other places, the ministries are actually fixed. I mean, there's the Secretary of Defense, that's fixed. The Homeland Security, that's fixed. So they are fixed. In our system, as with the UK system, which is the Westminster system, is that we allow basically certain ministries to be moved around in different places in terms of to kind of wherever the appetite is at the time. So there's some fluidity in the system or some flexibility in the system that allows us. So, like for example, you take this configuration around. I ended up with not only just the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, I also end up with the Ministry of Border Control and Labour. I mean, so I ended up with literally two ministries. Minister Ebanks ended up with Andre Ebanks, that is two ministries. Minister Bernie Bush ended up with two ministries. Minister Giuliani ended up with two ministries. And even the Premier himself also ended up with two ministries. So as you get down more and people want more focus on different areas, because yes, finance is important to everyone else, but I can tell you right now, in this government, the Ministry of Sustainability, which is a brand new ministry, is actually something that is very important to this government. And as such, we went out and we wanted a ministry to reflect that on its own, to show its priority.
So what's that going to mean exactly in terms of expenditure and I assume not very much revenue from that ministry?
No, actually, well, just like the police, I mean, it's not going to be revenue generating, but at the end of the day, when you create the proper social infrastructure for people to be productive, for investors to feel confident, then the business will come. No one is going to invest in a country where the crime is out of hand. No one is going to invest in a country where there's no governance structure. So again, as you put through all of this, and this is why we work very hard to make sure reputationally on an international level, we meet a lot as much as our international commitments. We want to keep the Cayman Islands off in the blacklist because at the end of the day, for people doing business with us, people also want to do business with places that are reputable.
You said something there, and you said a couple of things I'd like to pick on. We've got a couple of minutes before our break.
No problem.
The first is you talked about, the second one you mentioned was blacklists, and I think that's something that we should talk about perhaps in the second half of the show, Cayman's reputation, what people perceive Cayman to be. You also talked about crime, people wanting to do business in places that are safe and feel safe. How do you as a minister, as a deputy premier, address that when the police force isn't actually controlled or run by the government?
First of all, that is actually not a correct statement. What it actually is that the police force is actually on the
reported
direction,
by,
reported, but the budget is also is at a political level. So I give an example. Section 55 of the Constitution, which speaks to the governor's reserve powers, sets out what is remit, and then everything else is pretty much for the elected government. But if you read the wording on Section 55, it also says, and this is where the partnership comes in, where working together comes in, is that as long as the funds are also provided for it. So even, for example, the civil service, the governor decides who's hired, who's fired, and he has delegated that to the deputy governor, who's promoted. But at the end of the day, the parliament is also has to provide the funding for it. Okay. And if we are not in agreement with certain things, then that's a different story. We have had an issue one year way back where the government only voted $1 to run the government. And that has happened in the past. So it forces that level of communication and to give credit where credit is due to the governor. And I mean, we have had our clash when I was a member of the opposition, but I can honestly say to you, having worked with them closely for I think about 5 months or thereabouts, I found to be very decent, very nice, very professional. And even the commissioner, for example, very professional. You call him, he answers, or he turns the call shortly thereof. He takes a concern. And the one thing I do look for in people when I'm dealing with them is their ability to care. Do they really care? And I can say to the people of this country, having worked up close with the governor, genuinely speaking, he genuinely cares. Okay. And I have to give him his credit for that. Now, his dispute and my dispute is well known from the last go around in opposition.
Everyone's going to have disagreements about certain topics.
Yeah, and that's fine. What I mean? But I can say to you genuinely, I have not seen anything that would have caused me to question that he does not want the best for this country, regardless of where he has hailed from. So I really have got to give him his props in that regard.
Okay, well, hold that thought. We're just going to take a brief break, and then after the break, we'll probably come right back and talk about Cayman's reputation internationally, because that, as you alluded to, is one of the most important things that attracts business and keeps Cayman's finances afloat.
The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you. We are a non-for-profit member-centric plan with a democratically elected volunteer board of trustees representing all sectors of the Cayman Islands economy. Chamber Pension has an all-in expense ratio of 0.72% over 16,000 members, $430 million in assets under management. We were the first multi-employer pension plan approved by the regulator in the late 1990s. And today, we are still strong, secure, and are here for employees and employers alike. If you would like to join or request further information, visit chamberpension.ky. And for information as it happens, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Email admin@pensions.ky or call 745-7630. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you.
This is Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community. Brought to you by the CFA Society Cayman Islands.
And now, more Money Sense.
Welcome back to Money Sense and our conversation with Minister Chris Saunders, Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier, as well as Minister of Border Control. Did I get that right?
Border Control and Labour.
Because I rather demoted you earlier on by not giving you your full title. So
No. Listen, Member of Parliament is still the one title means the most to me because that is the one that people place their confidence in.
Well, they've elected you, is what you mean.
And those are my bosses. So the people of Boddington West are the people I report to.
Fair enough. Well, before the break, we had a conversation and you mentioned something about Cayman's reputation as being a vital topic or a vital harbinger of Cayman's success. And I want to sort of push on to that a little bit. But also, just before that, just ask you how you think Cayman's finances look to the outside world as investors are considering whether to do business in Cayman or not.
Well, I think the fact that right now that we're still running a surplus when just about everyone around the world is pretty much in deficit spending gives us an opportunity to highlight our model. If we had a model that was direct taxation based on payroll and everything else, the minute we had one industry close and everything else, we would have seen a much greater impact on our finance, our ability to actually generate an income if it was be driven by payroll, as opposed to us where we're a service-based economy. Now, this is not to say that the impact in tourism has not affected the government finances. Now, you look at customs revenue, for example, and we use 2019 as a base year because 2020 was so messed up. It'd be hard to compare what this year would have been to last year because it would have been almost impossible. I mean, as of the end of August, we were 92 million better in terms of revenues than we did in 2019. So we were basically up 92 million. Someone jump up and say that's great news. But then I say, guys, hold up. What's driving that? Well, we had 50 million of fees from private fund fees, which we didn't have in 2019.
And that'll probably be a one-time...
No, actually, no, that'll be recurring. And I really want to thank all those members in the financial service industry that lobbied hard for that fee coming because that 50 million alone is actually able to replace the tourism accommodation tax, which is like around 36 million a year, and also the cruise port tax, which is about maybe 11, 12 million a year.
Ironically, I suppose who you should be thanking for that is probably the EU and the OECD because they're the only people that wanted that tax.
No, I'm not going to give them thanks because it was one of those things that it wasn't mandatory the way in which it was structured. But, I mean, mostly a group of people more from the accounting side that actually pushed through for it. We could have achieved the same thing without getting revenues for it, really.
Because we have regulation in Cayman now in that sphere which is different to the US, different to the UK, harsher, tougher, more expensive.
Well, the thing about it is this, and the one thing that we are worried about, I mean, and I think any government would be worried about, is the cost of doing business in Cayman. Because at the end of the day, we still import a lot. We import a lot of talent, and sometimes a good talent actually costs money. You know, so there is that rebalance and that needs to take place. Now, just before I lose the train of thought, I was saying about the other item, is we were up 92 million, but 86 million of that positive variance was basically from two transactions. One proceeds of liquidation, which gave us about another 36 million. So from that standpoint, now customs revenues is also up compared to 2019. But here's a catch. If you look at areas where that's volume driven, like alcohol and fuel, for example, where it's not charged on value, but it's charged on volume, that is actually down.
Implying
But-
lower activity.
Yeah, but then, which of course, you'll have less fuel because there's no tour operators, there's no rent a car on island. And again, on the fuels, on the alcohol and tobacco, you have less tourists on island, less bars, restaurants being open. I mean, 500,000 stay over tourism in 2019 definitely had a material impact on the overall economic activity. But then we also got to look at too is that we had global inflation. So the other goods that are actually charged on a value basis, like you're bringing a car, you're bringing in something which is based on value and other stuff. Because of global inflation, we were actually able to collect more simply because those items that actually cost more. So that in itself, again, as global inflation will probably decrease next year. Now we see the challenges in the UK right now, where because of their Brexit deal, well, the way they negotiated it, they're literally having military people, I think, now at the fuel pumps and so forth. So there is the
You're going to
global
bring in
supply.
Brexit. This is a brilliant conversation.
Yeah, no, but there is the global supply issue that we need to look at too. So, when you're part of a global community, from that standpoint, there are certain things that you have to do to be part of the global community. And this is why we have always said from get-go that whatever the international standards is for our financial services industry, we will follow and adopt to those international standards. What we do have a problem with is when you're trying to put standards on us that is not internationally accepted or not everyone else is doing it. That is really where the pushback is. But if everyone is doing it, our competitors are doing it, then we're fine doing it.
I guess the comment there would be probably every single person in the legal industry would say the standards we have now in Cayman are tougher than they are anywhere else in the world.
That is actually true. But at the same time, also we got to look at.
So why? Why is that fair?
Yeah,
But
undeniably
we're not
true.
looking at apples to apples. We're not comparing apples to apples. I give you an example. I go back to my time in the U.S. of even when I went to school. It was very easy for me to open a bank account versus what it is here. But in the U.S., everyone filed taxes. Your employer files, what it is that they pay you as an expense. You also basically collect, you file what it is that you, and the government does their deduction on a monthly basis. So the government have an idea by you having a tax ID, every single penny that you make. Because what's revenues to use expense to someone, and all of that stuff can be cross-reference, and that's why you have audits when they can't make things correct. They have that structure. So they do have that system in place where they can say, well, this is how much we know that a person is earning. Whereas here, we don't have that. So for you to open a bank account and then start sticking money inside here, the bank can sit back and say, what do you expect your account profile to be? Now, for the U.S., for the government coming in, if they see you depositing a ton of money, and then all of a sudden, your income says you're making that, they're like, wait a minute, where's the rest of this coming from? So you're not looking at apples to apples in terms of how the structure is set up. But I can say it's a little bit onerous in Cayman, but I do understand at the end of the day where their fear comes from. Because I can tell you right now, as an elected person and as a person that was, works in the financial services industry and also see the value of the financial services industry, the one question I've always asked myself is this: what would have happened to the Cayman Islands financial industry if there was one bomber from 9/11 was ever found to have gotten 1 cent from a bank account in the Cayman Islands?
Well, we probably don't have enough oil to support ourselves.
Exactly. So that right there shows us, again, if you're going to play in the global arena, if you're going to be in global financing, then you can't not worry about terrorist financing. Mm-hmm. Are we worried about someone coming down there and doing some major terrorist act? When George W. Bush was here, one of the things I went to his speech, and one thing he said that I took away from that speech was every time he went to a world conference, he would sit beside a different leader. And then he would ask them a personal question to kind of get to know them better. And the one question he would ask is, what is it that keeps you up awake at night? What is it that keeps you up at night? Now, no one is going to tell him that answer or volunteer that answer. But then he will give them his answer first, which kind of sets the tone, and then they'll respond. And one of the things that he said was being woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning to say that a bomb has just been gone off in a city from some crazy bomb or something. And then he was using an example of the Chinese president, who then turned to him and said, well, my fear is I'm only elected by 8 people. And I have the largest population, but only 8 people or 13 people, whatever, whoever it is in the Communist Party that decides whoever the party leader is. And he's like, I support what you want to do with North Korea. But if I allow you to do what you want with North Korea, I am going to have a refugee crisis on my southern border. So that's the reason why I take the position that I do. It's not that I'm condoning what North Korea is doing. And he went on to say to him, unlike you, I have to find jobs for 25 million people every single year. And when you run out of things to do in China, we'd have gone out and build buildings that no one lives in just to keep people going. You see their Belt and whatever, I forgot
Belt and Road initiatives.
Yeah, initiative where they start expanding their ventures overseas. And if you go to many of those, it is their own people that's also being employed. But they have got to find a way, because according to him, which Bush was saying at the time, was that if you don't find a way to keep his people busy or going, then that's a revolution in this country too, because they never elected him, they never put him there.
But do you think regulation here in Cayman, talking of that, is smart, or is it just broad?
It's more, I wouldn't use the word smart, because I just realized, I almost said something a while ago, but I just remember as a member of cabinet now, I'm bound by collective responsibility. I've really got to watch what it is I see. Before, when I was in opposition, just MP Chris, I could have just put my opinion out. So I got to.
We won't tell anybody. Go on.
No, that's fine. Everybody's already listed. No, and we have just to put things in context, is that we have a very good minister, Andre, and knowledgeable, passionate. I have full confidence in him, along with everyone else in the team. But Andre is a little bit special in the sense of what he does and how he approaches problem. I mean, he's a very technical person, almost a technocrat, but has a certain amount of political savvy that gives him a kind of swag that is almost unheard of in politics, and one of the most decent persons that you can ever meet, But from that standpoint, what it is that he brings to the financial service, and just to answer your question in a roundabout way, is that for us it's about finding the balance, and that's really what it has got to be. Because at the same time, too, businesses also need resources to focus on business development. We have spent so much money on compliance. Right now, if you go to most companies, they're spending more money on compliance than on business development.
And there's an article in The Economist not long ago saying that of all the trillions of dollars spent on compliance, not one terrorist has been found because of it.
They have created an industry from it.
It's reactionary.
And the thing about it is this, and this is one of the things that surprises people. A couple of years back, we were at a conference in the UK, the CPA conference, and people were surprised when they found out that we had like about $100 and something million in the Cayman Islands. I mean, and that's the money that's floating around. All of this money that they're looking for has never set foot in Cayman. They have all this in the correspondent banks.
So what you're saying is we can regulate better, smarter. We can always regulate better and smarter. That's that. If I might put some words in your mouth.
Well, no. The thing about it is we can regulate better and smarter, but we have also got to accept that there are entities out there who basically don't want us to have what we have, and we have got to accept that also. And of course, like with anything else, they're using whatever what they can use.
Can we succeed against people who are bullying us in that respect?
Well,
we've succeeded for 40 years.
Seeing that we have done it now for about 30 years, I mean, at the end of the day, one of the things I would really like to see more from the financial services industry, if I can speak more candidly in that regard, is that while we are always playing defense, we are always growing. And if you look at it, we have always found a way to stay ahead and grow. Now, you look at banking, at one point we were close to 600 banks. Now we're down to about maybe 100 and something. Last time I looked at it was about 120 something. It's been a while since I've looked at it. We look at the funds industry, again, that we have seen, but we have also always find ways in which to continue to grow. And what I would like to see more businesses focus on over the next few years, the short term to the medium term, is bringing more businesses to Cayman. And of course, that requires certain adjustments from us. And that is why it's important for us to have the right governance structure in place, the right people in place, the right structure in place, so the confidence and everything else in our economy can continue.
So a message, if I might, in the last 5 seconds that we have before I have to wrap up, is you want to hear from the financial services sector ways of improving Cayman's finances are to bring new types of business, bring new activities.
Innovate. We've got to innovate. And we have always been good at innovation. And We have been focusing a lot on compliance, but we still need to walk and chew gum, and we still want more businesses to come here.
Fair enough. Well, look, Minister, it's been an absolute pleasure. We've run out of time, as we always do, unfortunately, on this show, and I didn't even get a chance to talk to you about the cost of living, which I think is a very important topic that I'd love to have a conversation with you about on another show, if you'd be delighted to join us again.
I definitely would be like to.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you, and I just wish to thank you for joining, and also thank our listeners. This is Money Sense. Please do tune in again in 2 weeks' time.
Money Sense is brought to you by the Chamber Pension Plan. For further information, visit chamberpension.ky. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you. Are you aware of the performance of your pension plan? The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan provides quarterly fund fact sheets for our members to stay informed with the plan's performance. For the year ended 30th of April, 2021, the various life cycle funds have provided returns between 10.5% and 43.2%. And our all-in expense ratio for year ended 30th of June, 2020 is currently the lowest it's ever been, 0.72%. Visit chamberpension.ky to review our fund fact sheets. You can see the performance as far back as 10 years. Remember that pensions are a longer-term investment strategy. Focus on the long term rather than the short-term returns. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan continues to perform for you.